Retro Nerd.
Hello there. This is James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and whenever I'm in this part of the galaxy, I listen to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. Makes flying a little more tolerable. Don't tell Anakin.
Hello, and welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And it's time. We are kicking off our year-long series discussing Revenge of the Sith in this episode. But before we get into all of that fun stuff, Jay, I want to remind everybody where we can be found online and social media.
Yeah, speaking of fun, this is where the fun begins. We are on Facebook and Instagram, conveniently at Podcast Stardust.
All right. The digital line, the signal's boosted to maximum output. The shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So I can't believe we're starting this, Jay. It's, here we are getting ready to start a brand new movie. We just finished up The Phantom Menace, and now it's time to get on to the Revenge of the Sith for its 20th anniversary, which we talked about just a bit in our news episode. And yeah, I'm always excited to do one of these series, and I've had a great time covering all the movies, and I love The Phantom Menace, but Revenge of the Sith is just such a great movie that I've been looking forward to this all week. So,
Me too.
it's so exciting to finally get here.
Oh, I totally agree with that. And yeah, I'm with you. This is definitely of the prequels. It's that one movie that just, when you think about it, it just hits you in all the feels. And I've been so excited to talk about this. So it's going to be Revenge of the Sith all year, and we're here for it.
All right. Well, we're chomping at the bit, so let's get to it. We got our guest standing by. Here it is, part 1 of our series on Revenge of the Sith. All right. So, as is our tradition, we have a returning guest, Ryder Waldron from Idiot's Ray and the Star Wars School Dentistry, joining us for this first segment of our Revenge of the Sith series. Ryder, welcome back. How you doing?
Hey, thanks. I am great, and I appreciate you guys having me on. I have said this every time I've been on, but I love watching the movies like this and breaking them down into small portions because I notice so much more because I'm just focusing on like 10 to 12 minutes, and it is a great way to watch a movie, I think.
Yeah, it really is. And we've joked a lot too as far as how many times you've been on the show with us and that you have the gold jacket. Now we're going to have to start putting like the officer stripes on the arm, kind of thing.
Yes, I like that. I will dress appropriately next time.
Yeah.
I'll take it. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, you're our usual guinea pig when it comes to the series that we do for each one of these movies. And so you're the first person we get to ask these questions. Up first, what was your first experience seeing Revenge of the Sith? So I'm wanting to know is how old were you? Where did this fall in your order of watching Star Wars? And what did you know going into this? Because at this point, Star Wars has been around for nearly 50 years, and everyone's got a lot of different experience.
Yeah. So I was 29. I had been married for just over a year, maybe about a year and a half. My wife was pregnant with our first kid, and this was her first time going to see a new Star Wars movie in the theater. So she had no idea what was happening. She may have wanted to back out of the marriage at that point, but I remember leaving work early and going to the theater because this was before there were reserved seats at theaters, and so left work early, went and got in line at like 10 o'clock in the morning, and the movie was at midnight. They did midnight movies at that point, and I remember just sitting there for hours. And my wife came, I think, closer to like 10 p.m. And we watched it. I think she fell asleep in part of it, but it was great. I loved it. I love the experience of going to new Star Wars movies, which I'm hoping that we get more coming up. yeah, so I love the movie. I am super excited to talk about it tonight. Yeah. Did that answer all your questions, Dennis? I'm
Oh
not too
yeah,
sure.
yeah, definitely.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
it's like I said, I knew you were about the same age as Jay and I, so that same generation. So
Yeah.
this was not going to be your first Star Wars movie, but however, I'm looking ahead to some guests who will have been much younger than we are when they were, in the prequel trilogy was their trilogy of Star
Yeah.
Wars movies
Hmm.
and stuff like that. And of course, the thing about this movie is that it is the finale of a trilogy that leads into the original trilogy, which we know very well. And so we kind of knew where this movie would end in certain regards. We just didn't really know how it was going to get there. And so I'm looking forward to talking to people about that when it comes down to it. So I mean, you clearly knew that Anakin was going to become Darth Vader and the
Yep.
like, and that at some point we're going to have some sort of explanation about Luke and Leia. So anyway,
Yep.
Jay, you want to go ahead and ask the second one?
There you go. Oh, I would love to. All right, Ryder. So, what is your favorite scene in Revenge of the Sith? And I'm
Mm.
just curious if it has ever changed over time or if it's always been the same.
My gosh, I don't even know if I've ever thought of this before, which is ridiculous. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is Obi-Wan and Anakin right before Obi-Wan cuts off his limbs because they're having this conversation. Obi-Wan has the high ground. Anakin is still as cocky as ever, and it is. And after he cuts him down, and Obi-Wan is sliding down, and he says, "I hate you," and Obi-Wan says, "You were my brother, Anakin. I loved you." And it's like there's so much emotion in that, and it's a Star Wars movie, and we're not always used to having things like this in a Star Wars movie, and so I guess right now I would say that's my favorite scene. I could probably go, Vader getting the mask on and the breath coming out of his mask the first time. That's amazing. There's just, God, there's so many. This is probably my favorite prequel movie. So God, I'm gonna have to go back and think about that after we're done talking tonight.
Yeah, well,
You
it's
know what?
hard to
I'm with
pick.
you though. Seriously. It is
Yeah,
so hard
because
to pick. Yeah. Yeah.
there,
And I'm
Yeah.
sitting here thinking myself, even like, what would I pick? And I don't even really know. Of course, that
Uh,
one stands out what you said, but
yeah. Okay. I have one more, and I think this is super cool. Is when Yoda walks in to confront Palpatine, and there's the two guards by the door, and Yoda just waves his hand, and the guards just slam into the wall and fall to the ground. I mean, what a cool move. I love that part too.
yeah, and the fact that Palpatine is just like his voice is dripping with disgust.
Yes.
Master
Yeah.
Yoda,
Yeah.
you survived. Like my lucky
Yeah.
day. I have to confront you now.
Yeah, that's great.
So, last question before we get into the segment, Ryder, who is your favorite character from Revenge of the Sith?
Oh, it's gotta be Obi-Wan Kenobi right now, with Anakin being a close second. I don't know how I even separate those 2, but I feel like at this point, I relate more to Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's not super excited about going on these adventures. He's more grounded with the dogma of the Jedi, kind of. He has a lot of suspicion with Palpatine and all politicians. Um, yeah, I would say Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he is just so good when he uses his lightsaber. And if you can defeat Anakin, that's pretty dang good because Anakin is so good and so cool, and I love everything about him. It's a tough one, but I'm gonna say Obi-Wan just by a little bit right now.
by a limb.
By a oh, too soon, too soon. But yes,
Sorry. Couldn't
yes,
resist.
I love it. Yep.
And not to mention, he gives us one of the best Star Wars memes ever with the "Hello there."
Oh,
So
Yes.
for
Yep.
that we get
sure.
with his greeting from General
Yep.
Grievous. So
And the
Yep.
high
It's
ground.
great. Yep.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
great.
this movie's full of them. It really is hard to beat Revenge of the Sith when it comes to prequels. So.
Yeah, it is.
All right, well, let's get into this segment, and it runs from the beginning of the movie to 11 minutes and 21 seconds. And as all Star Wars, well, I should say all saga movies do, it starts with the text of a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, which leads into the opening crawl, Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. War. The Republic is crumbling under attacks by the ruthless Sith Lord Count Dooku. There are heroes on both sides. Evil is everywhere. In a stunning move, the fiendish droid leader General Grievous has swept into the Republic and kidnapped Chancellor Palpatine, leader of the Galactic Senate. As the Separatist droid army attempts to flee the besieged capital with their valuable hostage, 2 Jedi Knights lead a desperate mission to rescue the captive Chancellor. ... So I'll start with you, Ryder. What stands out to you from the crawl of the movie?
So when I've watched this a couple of times in the last couple of days, the main lines that stand out are there's heroes on both sides and evil is everywhere. Like it doesn't say, evil is on the, side of the separatists, whatever. Evil is everywhere. Which I don't know that I've ever paid attention to that as much, but with Palpatine in control of the Republic, evil is everywhere. Dooku's with the separatists, evil is there too. It's interesting, heroes on both sides. I wonder who that is referring to on the separatist side, because the Jedi, and there's so many heroes on the Republic side with the clones and all that, but I was curious about who it's referring to as heroes on both sides as in reference to the separatists. I don't know, but that's what really stood out for me.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think it's a conversation Jay and I had a while ago, which is when we've been talking about the Clone Wars, which is where are the heroes from the separatists on
Yeah.
this part? You typically, their poster childs are Asajj Ventress, who of course has a falling out, but she gets redeemed later, not during the Clone Wars. General Grievous, Count Dooku, who can portray a positive face to the public, but he is otherwise not, we know what he's doing behind the scenes, ordering people's deaths, and the King of Toydaria and the like, King Katunko. And so he does a lot of nasty things. So yeah, it's a good question. I mean, and clearly the evil is everywhere. Yeah, I can see that because we know Palpatine is in charge of the Republic and he is Darth Sidious there. Jay, how about you? What stands out to you from the crawl?
Well, for me, what hit me this time was just the fact that they address Sith Lord Count Dooku instead of Darth Tyrannus. And because he was, mentioned, that name was mentioned in Attack of the Clones even. So it's not something like it was an obscure piece of information. And we know just from lore that Sith Lords are always addressed as Darth something or other. So it was just kind of an interesting choice, I thought, to use Count Dooku, other than the fact that that's probably how most people are going to recognize him, is by that nomenclature, you know what I mean? Instead of Darth Tyrannus, because you really kind of had to pay attention to know that that was his Sith Lord name.
Well, and I guess the question is how widely is that known that he's a Sith Lord? Because that's something that the Jedi only really found out towards the end of the Clone Wars. And I think season 6 there. And so has that become public knowledge? So this fact that they're calling him a Sith Lord, are they just telling the audience that, or is that something that everybody knows at this point?
Right. That's a good question.
It's a good point. Yeah.
Stylistic note here. Other than the name of the movie, Revenge of the Sith, this crawl does not have any words that are in all caps, which differentiates it from the rest of them. They typically will put something in all capital letters there. But, Jay, you can see it. I put in our notes. There's no words that are all capitalized there.
Right. Right. Yeah, I hadn't picked up on that.
And the other thing is that, with the way it starts off, war, exclamation point, who cannot hear the narrator from the Clone Wars now reading this?
Oh, for sure.
War, the Republic is crumbling under attacks by the ruthless Sith Lord Count Dooku. But yeah, so
we need that. We need that edit. Make it slow.
Our little news serial reading of it. But right, indeed. Okay. Well, then we get right into the action. As with all of the saga movies, we start off with a starship. In this case, it's a Jedi cruiser. And Anakin and Obi-Wan fly over it as they head into the Battle of Coruscant. And they are headed towards General Grievous's ship, the Invisible Hand. They pick up some backup with Oddball and his squadron. And then we get, they get decimated. We get that little homage to The Empire Strikes Back with the one pilot that goes flying out of a ship after it gets destroyed. But before we get too much further, I don't know that it's necessarily my favorite scene, but it is definitely one of my favorite parts of this movie. I love the big galactic space battle. And so watching Anakin and Obi-Wan fly into the middle of this conflict is always just super cool. And how they fly past the cruiser. They're going in between cruisers and Republic cruisers and separatists that are just blasting away each other. You got starfighters all over the place. And there's just chaos all over the screen. Jay, what do you think about the opening, the way they handle
Ah,
it there?
it's so glorious. It is just absolutely glorious. And I remember the first time seeing this, it was one of the first date nights that my husband and I had had when the kids were little. We finally were able to get out and do something. And just seeing this on the big screen and just the scope and the scale of this and as you said, just the idea of just being over Coruscant and being in space at this very moment in time and just seeing the different levels of the battle that were going on. You know what I mean? Because on a ground battle, you just have the ground. Whereas
Mhm.
in the sky, you have, so much more going on. And there's so many different, types of levels that when you're going up and down and all around. And then the way that they were able to zoom in on the cockpits and just the lighting and the colors and the music. Oh my gosh. It's just
Mhm.
yeah, it's probably my favorite opening of any of the movies, quite honestly, other than the very first one because there's nostalgia involved in that one. But
And I
yeah,
absolutely love the music that John Williams put together. It starts off with the drums,
yes.
the bum,
Oh,
bum, 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 and then it gets into that, that cadence of the Star Wars and Force theme as it goes through there, as they head into the battle there. Ryder, what stands out to you from that opening sequence?
Well, I watching it today, I'm wondering how did anybody survive? Because these ships are just so close to each other, and it's like, I picture like pirate ships on like the sea, back in the olden days, and just blasting each other. And I just don't know how anybody survived all this. And like you said, Dennis, there's chaos everywhere. It feels like Anakin is right in his element. He is like enjoying this, and
oh yeah.
Obi-Wan is like annoyed to be there. But
Mhm.
there is so much going on, and if you could almost just isolate like certain sections of the screen that you're watching to see what's going on because there's so much detail just in the background stuff, it's amazing. And the how close they are to Coruscant, you can see Coruscant right below them. That's crazy. But it's just so cool just how they fly in above the ship and the angles that it's filmed at. It's just I love it. I think it would be probably my top 1 or 2 or top sorry, 2 or 3 of openings of the movie, so it's just amazing.
Hmm.
Yeah, one of the things I paid attention to this time around, at the last part of the crawl says, as the Separatist droid army attempts to flee the besieged capital with their valuable hostage, ignore everything that comes after that. They're getting cremated here
Yeah,
in this battle here because there's the one blast that comes out of the bottom of a Jedi cruiser and just completely blows up a Separatist cruiser, like hits it in the middle, and the thing just falls apart. And there's
yeah,
lots as they're flying through this battle, you see Separatist ship after Separatist ship just getting destroyed. But despite that, they still have numbers there, which helps them out. And I know George outdid himself with this one because it is just, it, for my money, still the best space battle is the Battle of Endor. When they're
mhm.
going to blow up the second Death Star. But well, it's much longer for one thing. But for the moments that we get of this, it's just absolutely priceless.
Yeah, this feels like a scene that could be like the end of a movie type of battle, and you get it
Right.
right
Right.
at the start. Like, holy cow, where do you go from there?
Hmm.
Indeed.
Hmm. You jump
Indeed.
in and you're like, okay, we're doing this. Like right now,
Yeah,
we're
like,
doing this.
wow. Yeah.
Okay. So we could talk about this for an entire episode, but we got another like 7 minutes of the segment to go. But as they are on task, Anakin points out that the Invisible Hand, he doesn't call it that, but we all know that's the name of the ship. Grievous' ship is dead ahead. It's the one crawling with Vulture droids. And so they pick up Oddball Squadron, and the Vulture droids come flying at them. Obi-Wan says, let them pass. We'll go between them. And then the whole point of the Clone Squadron is to pave the way for Anakin and Obi-Wan to peel off all of the Vulture droids. And Anakin can't let that go, though, as Oddball and them are starting to take losses. He says he's going to go back and help them out. And Obi-Wan points out, nope, they're doing their job, so we can do ours. And, we just finished last year our review of The Phantom Menace, and we've been noticing some things in our discussion of the Clone Wars, Jay, about how at times Obi-Wan comes off as kind of callous, and it's talking about R2D2. It's just a droid.
Mhm.
Astromechs are a dime a dozen, and that and the other. And so I was thinking about here, and I don't think he was being particularly callous here. It was we have a mission. This is their job. If we stop to do their job, we're not going to complete our mission. Anyways, that's my take on it. Ryder, what do you think?
Yeah, I feel like this part just kind of sets the tone for, I mean, almost the whole movie. Anakin wants to help others, even though it's not the main goal. Obi-Wan is focused on the mission, and even when Obi-Wan's comms start kind of fading out, and it seems like his ship is going down, he still mentions the mission, and he's saying, nothing too fancy, while Anakin is, doing all kinds of spins and everything like that. But yeah, I don't know if Obi-Wan is callous or not, but he is focused on what is more important, which unfortunately is the Chancellor. And, it's too bad that these clone lives are not valued quite like the Chancellor's life is. Which you can't fault or can't fault Anakin for thinking that. Like, he values these people, and they're probably close friends of his, maybe, or at least, he knows them well. And so I felt like this kind of gives a feel of how the movie is going to go. And, we know what happens. It leads Anakin to becoming so attached to Padme that he can't lose her. And you can see that he has the attachment to the clones to start out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's true. Yeah, and it doesn't help that, we've often said that it's great that the clones are able to manifest themselves as individuals and having names like Oddball and such, but it doesn't help Anakin with his attachments when he's able to put a name with a face. Whereas Obi-Wan, even though he is able to call people by, the clones by their names, whether it be Rex or Cody or whatever, he still maintains that line, between, as you mentioned, Dennis, this is the mission, this is what we have to do, this is what they are meant to do. We can't get caught up in that. And I mean, he even does the same thing, sort of when he loses R4, he just basically says, oh dear,
Yeah.
Anakin would have been freaking out, even though like, R2 is gone, kind of a thing.
Yes.
Yeah, he would have gone bad for him. And I think the other thing is, again, having looked at the crawl, as we just discussed it here, this clearly is a desperation attack by the Separatists, because at this point, they're not winning the war. And so the best they can do is kidnap the Chancellor and force some sort of a settlement of things here. And I think Obi-Wan and Anakin realize that this is the war right here. If they can win this battle, then it's a matter of cleaning up with the Separatist armies. It's not going to be prolonged. It is a cleanup operation after this, and so they cannot afford to let them get away with Chancellor Palpatine. Of course, nobody knows that he's a Sith Lord and engineered this whole thing to begin with, but at least that's my take on the perspective of what's going on here.
I think that makes total sense. And that
Mhm.
also helps to explain a little bit more why, even though we said that Anakin's obviously enjoying this is why he says this is where the fun begins. Because he knows that this is going to be, the exclamation point on the war.
Indeed. Your Ryder, you mentioned earlier that every time you watch this, you kind of see more, and there's you can take in more, especially when we're doing in the movie in these type of segments. One of the things that I noticed this time is the Vulture droids start pursuing them, and they launch the missiles, Anakin and Obi-Wan, and as they're attempting to escape from those missiles, they fly by the bridge of one of the Separatist cruisers, and I paused it at 4 minutes and 40 seconds. And if you look closely, you can see the battle droids in the windows of that cruiser. And I had never, ever noticed that before. I mean, I barely noticed the background before, let alone that there were battle droids in the window there.
I think one of them has binocs also, doesn't he? Like he raises binocs up as they fly by.
That maybe
just enjoying
I
the
didn't
scenery.
notice. So it was the first time I noticed the droids at all. So,
Wow.
But okay, of course we've got the famous scene where Anakin spinning's a good trick. He manages to destroy two of the missiles that way as they pursue him. But then Obi-Wan's not so lucky. The missiles pass him up, explode, and disgorge buzz droids, which crawl all over his ship. And that leads to all kinds of things. Jay, you already mentioned it. R4 gets destroyed. Anakin tries to blast some of the droids off, which Obi-Wan responds as, hold on, Anakin, you're getting us both killed. And when that doesn't work, he tries to ram them off with his ship before, they get enough of them off that Obi-Wan's going to be able to make it to Grievous's ship. And then R2-D2 goes mano a mano with one of the buzz droids and zaps it in the center eye to get rid of it there. I don't know about Ryder if you've been keeping up with the High Republic, but Jay, you and I have been reading all the books, and one of the things that keeps coming up in those books is the scav droids that the Nile have deployed all over the place, and how they swarm onto ships and tear them apart. And so I couldn't help but wonder if the buzz droids here were an inspiration for that.
Hmm. I didn't put that
Yeah,
together.
yeah. I've read some of the High Republic books, not all of them, so I did not put that together at all.
Okay. But do y'all have any other observations on the saga of the buzz droids here in this battle?
Well, just Anakin being Anakin. It's classic Anakin trying to try to solve a problem, but almost creating more problems. He knocks off part of Obi-Wan's wing by shooting them, and he tries to smash him off, and one ends up getting over onto Anakin's ship. If it had torn R2's head off, then he would have felt really bad about that. But Anakin sometimes thinks with his heart and not his head, as we know.
He does indeed. Yes. And he's so calm about the whole thing too.
Yeah.
You're right, master. Bad idea. Let's do this instead. And it's like almost like they're just strolling through the mall, and he's picking lint off of Obi-Wan's shoulder or something, and it's he's just so
Yeah.
calm throughout the whole thing. But for me,
He's
it's
almost
just
frustrated though in that moment. It's like, you're
yeah.
right, bad idea. Let's try something else.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you, Jay, but it's just I
No, you're
didn't want to
good.
let the topic pass by, which is it just goes to who Anakin is. He doesn't believe that there's a problem he can't solve, and he will try and do it right there in that moment, whether he can actually do it or not.
Mm-hmm. It's so true. It's so
Yeah,
true.
that's definitely true.
And then the only other thing for me is I was just reminded of all the times that Anakin has picked the color yellow. And I think it goes back to, just the Naboo starfighter. He got to fly a yellow starfighter then. And then even in Attack of the Clones, when he grabs the speeder, he makes the joke, master, me, I had to pick a color I really liked. And the speeder that they went through on episode 2 was yellow, and now his starship is yellow.
Hmm.
Why didn't
Yeah,
George
that's
Lucas make
interesting.
his pod racer yellow? That
I
would
don't
have been
know.
like the clinching piece for that right
Right?
there.
I know, but perfect. But
Yeah, that's a
And
good
hilarious.
he
observation. I
flew,
never thought of it that way.
and he flew first in the Naboo starfighter, which was yellow. Is that right?
Yeah,
In the
that's what I'm
Phantom
talking
Menace.
about.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, no, you're good.
Yeah.
All right. So they get through all of that, and basically Obi-Wan is kind of helpless. And as they approach Grievous' ship, he I love Obi-Wan's response. It's like, hell, have you noticed the shields are still up? And so Anakin has to go blast those so they can get in there. One of the things I love about their arrival in the hangar is it's like complete role reversal. And Obi-Wan's ship goes skidding to a halt, and he launches himself out and starts attacking the droids with like the most flair. Meanwhile, Anakin's ship comes to a stop. R2 jumps out, but Anakin is like unbuckling his hatches, and then he just kind of
Right.
steps out of the ship.
Mhm.
Which, if you'd asked me how is this going to go, that's not what I would have guessed for these two guys prior to seeing that scene.
Yeah, in my notes, I made note of that. Like Obi-Wan, once he gets out of that cockpit, he seems like he's at ease. He's, a little more jovial. He wants to spring the trap. And, it seems like he's more in his element here. And Anakin's just kind of taking his sweet time. Like I don't know. It was just interesting how their personalities kind of flip at this point.
That's so
Yeah.
true. That's a great observation. But they're so fluid with each other. I mean, they just go
Yeah.
right into what they need to do just as a dance, when they're fighting off those battle droids. It's just beautiful to watch.
Yeah, they
Yeah, they
immediately find
really
each
are
other.
in sync.
Yeah. Yeah, and they get back to back, take out the droids, all the while telling R2, "Hey, go locate the Chancellor. We're taking care of some things over here, but go find the Chancellor for us."
Yeah.
At which they do, and then once they've done that, R2 locates the Chancellor. He's on the observation deck on top of the spire, and Anakin says, "I sense Count Dooku." Obi-Wan's response is, "I sense a trap. Next move, spring the trap." And one of the things that's occurring to me as we talk about this, we're nearly 30 minutes into our conversation, is that there is so much stuff to geek out about in this opening sequence of this
Mhm.
movie.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it just keeps going that way throughout the entire movie here.
Oh yeah,
Um,
it does. It
yeah,
does.
George Lucas saved his best for last when it came to this trilogy here with
For
this movie.
sure.
Yeah. I wish we could have seen more of Anakin and Obi-Wan fighting alongside each other like we do see them flying and then fighting here. alongside each other. I guess we get it in the Clone Wars, but there's something about the live action with Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor doing it that I just love every second of it.
Oh, absolutely. I do too.
I
And I
yeah,
love the way you put it too, Ryder, when you said that Obi-Wan is just jovial when he says spring the trap. He is. He's
Yeah,
just
like
like
he's happy, he's
he's just
excited.
boy-like. Yeah, it's almost the equivalent of Anakin saying this is where the fun begins, you know?
mhm.
Yeah, and I love the memes that I've seen on the internet about, Obi-Wan saying, Sith Lords are a speciality, and then it shows him like getting defeated by all the Sith Lords all the time. And it's like, why are you so excited to go fight fight Count Dooku again? Like, I don't get it, but he seems very excited. Maybe he's wanting to redeem himself. I don't know, but he just seems a little too happy right now.
Mhm.
So they give R2D2 the comm link, and then they go on their way. And then the next scene is General Grievous arriving on the bridge, and the captain tells them the Jedi have landed, and they're tracking them. They're on the ship, and Grievous' response is just as Dooku predicted. And on the one hand, I kind of feel like this is supposed to be part of the whole ring theory thing, where Palpatine kept saying it's like everything is going according to what I've foreseen in Return of the Jedi. And Dooku's making a prediction that the Jedi are going to show up here. And of course, we know Sidious is behind all of this with the benefit of hindsight and the like. But Grievous is, he's coughing a lot. And of course, the explanation for that at the time was the Genndy Tartakovsky Clone Wars micro series, where Mace Windu had just damaged him during that escape from Coruscant. And I don't know that we quite have an explanation from the now canon Clone Wars, do we?
Not that I know. That's the only explanation is from the micro series.
Yeah. Yeah. But this is the first shot that we get of Grievous live action. What did y'all think?
I think he's great, and for being like all CGI, like even now, the CGI still holds up. Like I can't really tell that there's anything fake there, and so George Lucas was ahead of his time with all the CGI, and most of it in this trilogy really holds up pretty well, and especially in this movie, I feel like. I mean, you can that the starships aren't real and all that, but General Grievous looks pretty natural in this scene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he
Jay?
really does. And it's actually really impressive because as you said, the CGI was so ahead of its time. And I don't know, there's been a lot of movies here lately that I feel like it's gone, taken some step backwards, that it's not as good in some cases as it used to be.
Yeah.
And this is just a great case of just absolute perfection. But I just really quickly I want to make one note of how Obi-Wan tossed that comm link to R2. He basically has integrated R2, even though we've said that Obi-Wan's not necessarily attached, quote unquote, to droids. Truly sees R2 as one of the team. Like he just tosses him that comm link and it's like, here you go, buddy. Do your
Oh, yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And I've got some comments on that based on what happens in the elevator a little bit that we'll get
Oh yeah.
into. Yeah, there's definitely a shift with Obi-Wan when it comes there. It's not just another droid, and it's not someone you can just rejoice because they've merged with the Force, like a person would be if they've died or anything there. So yeah, Obi-Wan knows how important R2 is to everything.
hmm
Yeah.
Okay, so now we get to the elevator, and just before we get there, Anakin and Obi-Wan get cornered by a couple of droidicas, which they don't destroy, but they fend off long enough to get onto the elevator, only to find that there is a squad of battle droids in the elevator waiting for them, which they quickly turn around and decimate. Again, another fun geek out moment of this movie where they just start laying into these battle droids, and I love the synchronization of their actions at the end of it, where they're both doing the same parry and slice at the same time.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and
Talk
right
about
before
advanced.
that,
Yep.
when the destroyers show up, it does parallel a lot of the Phantom Menace when the destroyers show up for Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan says, "Master destroyers," and Anakin says something fairly similar to that, and then they kind of back into that. But it reminded me a lot of the Phantom Menace when we first saw the destroyer droids.
Oh,
That's a good
nice.
point. I
hmm
had not made that connection, but you're absolutely right, because that's what happens when they're at the door to the bridge of the Trade Federation's Lucrehulk
Yeah.
battleship there. So,
And it's probably
okay.
good that they were in sync when they were slicing and dicing because Anakin would have lost a limb sooner
Yes,
than he
he
That's
did.
would
right.
have.
Or
It was a
another limb, I
tight,
guess.
yeah, it was a tight little space they were in,
It
really.
was.
It's the I think the only person who's done it better is Captain America in
Yes.
Oh,
in
yeah.
Winter Soldier.
There you go.
So,
Yeah.
Love it.
all right. So they get onto the elevator and we go back and forth between them and R2D2. So R2 is manning his post, looking for information, just kind of being the man in the chair. And the super battle droids show up. And so he has to hide. And the super battle droids start looking for, or searching the Obi-Wan's fighter ship. And then the elevator stops. And again, complete conflict of personalities here. Anakin starts to immediately cut a hole open in the roof, and Obi-Wan's like, well, let's call R2 D2 here. What are you doing? And so again, they're brothers as it comes down to it, but completely different perspective on solving problems. Anakin jumps on the roof, to which Obi-Wan responds, always on the move. And as R2's activating the elevator, it starts to go down. Obi-Wan says, no, we need to go up. And Anakin jumps off into a doorway. I'm sorry, I'm just going to talk this scene that we could discuss it. The battle droids show up where Anakin is hanging from the ledge and tell him to put his hands up. R2 switches the elevator and it starts going up just as he's covered by the super battle droids. Anakin jumps on the top. The battle droids get crushed. Anakin's back in the elevator, and R2 destroys the super battle droids with some oil and grease and his boosters, which catches them on fire. And at the end of this, Anakin admonishes Obi-Wan, no loose wire jokes, to which Obi-Wan protests his innocence. Did I say anything? Anakin says he's trying. He's like, I didn't say anything. So that's that scene. That's the end of our segment here. But it's a lot that happens here in a very short amount of time there. Y'all are making the comment about how much Obi-Wan has kind of accepted R2D2 as part of the team. And yeah, he's completely relying on him here, even if he wants to tease him at the end of this segment here. It's like, the loose wire thing.
Yeah, he's totally reliant on R2 at this point. Like, he'll make fun of the droids and all that, but then he really needs R2 at this point. And it's if I was R2, I might be like, maybe I'll get around to moving that elevator in just a second because you've been kind of mean to me lately, Obi-Wan. But maybe that's just me. I'm petty.
No, I could totally see R2 doing something like that. I mean, he's definitely got his own personality for sure. And the whole loose wire jokes thing cracks me up just because the fact that I almost see R2 as like the middle child, where Obi-Wan's the older brother, and then Anakin is the younger brother that's sticking up for the middle child because
Yes.
the older brother's constantly teasing that middle child. But yeah. Yeah. And I love when the droids say, hands up, Jedi. It's like, where is he supposed to, like, he's hanging on to the ledge. What is he supposed to do? His hands are already up, technically.
Well, and these droids are so stupid. They're looking down the elevator shaft. They see the elevator come. They say, "Uh-oh!" All they had to do was back up a step, but they stand right there and keep looking, get their heads knocked off.
Their processors weren't working quite
Yeah,
right.
I guess.
But
Come on.
Yeah.
another thing I have to point this out is, and I've been kind of chomping at the bit to say this, is that I feel like when I saw this movie for the first time, I picked out so many things that were little Easter egg callbacks to other movies. Of course, I have a bad feeling about this is one of those that is mentioned so much in Star Wars. But when Obi-Wan says that always on the move, and he says it just like Alec Guinness, in A New Hope, I was like, oh my gosh, this is right here. We're starting to tie the bridge. We're getting this bridge built here between the old and the new, and I love every second of it.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
And I just kind of love the situation that R2D2 is in. He is so dedicated to standing his post, doing his job. He hides the comlink inside himself to try and shush Obi-Wan Kenobi so that he doesn't get heard by the battle droids. And at first it works. The one supervisor's like, "What was that?" And the other one says, "That's nothing. Get back to work." And he's going about doing his thing, and then he ultimately gets discovered. But and then he pulls the boss move, which he sprays them with all that grease, and then before
Yes.
he even hits the floor, engages his boosters and catches them all on fire, and he never brings it up again. I mean, R2 is just so confident when it comes to these things. It's he doesn't brag about anything. He will let others like Luke and the Last Jedi know when they failed or they've fallen down or on their things, but he just goes about his business. He does his thing.
Yeah, he
Mhm.
took out 2 super battle droids without a lightsaber or anything, just kind of his wits
Yeah,
and what he had on him, and, Obi-Wan and Anakin are taking out these regular battle droids with lightsabers and, yeah, yeah, R2 ought to be, kinda walking around with his head held high.
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
He's a bit more of a pardon my language, a badass than people give him credit
Yep,
for. So
He really
absolutely.
is. Yeah, and such an integral part of so many of the success stories, all through the saga for sure. And I know it's not necessarily canon, but I love the a certain point of view story about him, with his mission and the things that he was supposed to be doing. And it's just, yeah,
Mhm.
I love it.
Yeah,
So good.
great.
well, we got to the end of the segment a lot faster than I thought we would, but that's kind of sometimes what happens when we have a very action heavy sequence as opposed to where there's conversations happening and people revealing things. So I want to take a little bit of time to ask you some other questions about the movie, Ryder. And
Sure.
one of those is that we knew at the end of this movie that Anakin was going to become Darth Vader, but it was a really big reveal in The Empire Strikes Back, which of course was released prior to this. That Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father. He told me enough. You killed him. No, I am your father. So that twist, if you watch the movies in episode order, kind of gets ruined. How do you feel about that?
If you watch, you're saying if you watch from episode 1 to episode 6?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that kinda does take away from it. So, my usually preferred viewing order is from release order, but there's so much more in the 6 in the 6 those first 6 saga movies that I think the general public probably sees the reveal as, "No, I am your father" is like the overarching thing and like the most important thing. But to me, the most important thing is that Anakin is redeemed. So if we're watching it, you know, to find out what happens in Anakin's story, then the real reveal is at the end of Return of the Jedi when he returns as a Jedi. And that is such a cool sequence to me. I love every time it's on TV, I'll sit there and watch and so I can see that scene. And if you contrast the mask going on at the end of Revenge of the Sith to the mask coming off at the end of Return of the Jedi, that's just as good as the reveal of I am your father. At this point, we all know that he's the father, but it's so good to see, even if you were a brand new Star Wars fan and you knew Darth Vader was Luke's dad, to watch how his whole story kind of transpires. Sorry, that's a long way to say that I guess I'm okay with it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Jay, what do you
Yeah, I
think?
would agree. I mean, it's just like watching the movie Titanic. You know the boat's gonna sink, but
Yeah,
you
yeah.
still, you still enjoy the story and you still are mesmerized by how the turn of events actually did take place. And so, I mean, we all had the experience of, having the prequels first. And, it's different. It's just such a different way to experience Star Wars from having like the prequels available first. So it
Mhm.
is I'll be very interested to hear from our guests also later on in the series to kind of compare and contrast these answers to see, how everybody feels about it too. But I mean, I remember my husband telling me when we went to see the movie that my jaw dropped open basically right after Anakin had decided to join Palpatine through the rest of the movie. He said, "I thought
Mm.
you like," he goes, "Every time I looked over at you, your mouth was just open the whole time." So even though we knew it was gonna happen, we didn't know how it was gonna happen. And so I think every movie does still give us a reveal that is just as powerful as
Yeah.
the others.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, like I said, we all knew Anakin was going to become Darth Vader by the end of this because the whole name check that Luke says, Anakin Skywalker, is your true name. You only forgot. But that being said, I know one of the reasons that they had to show the turn to Darth Vader in this is because they knew Darth Vader sells tickets. And if you put him in the movie at some point, show images of him, that was only going to help things out. I'm fine with that. And I don't, George wanted to make his movie and he wanted to tell the story he wanted to tell. And I don't begrudge him that. But there's two things they could have done, which is we could have known, there was no way that we were not going to know after watching the prequels that Luke and Leia were not, weren't Anakin's children. That was just a given, the way things were going. But Sidious didn't have to name Darth Vader in this movie. And they didn't have to show him being turned in to Darth Vader. Last time we could have seen Anakin, he could have been left burning to death on the shores of the lava lake. And then, then we could have been wondering about Darth Vader through, if you watch these episode orders the first time, you could have been wondering about Darth Vader as you get into the trilogy and what happened to Anakin there. And there's still an untold story. And so maybe it doesn't work now that I'm talking this out because, what happened to my father, well, Obi-Wan says, Darth Vader was a pupil of mine before he turned to evil. He betrayed and murdered your father. Well, we know that doesn't happen here.
Yeah.
So we would have been catching Obi-Wan a lie. So anyways, that would have been difficult to do. But it would have been cool if George came up with a clever way of preserving that twist through the storytelling. But that may have been too much to ask for because we as an audience already knew too much going into the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true. And, I know a lot of people were hoping to get 3 prequel movies of Darth Vader just being Darth Vader in the black suit, going around murdering a bunch of people. And, I'm glad we didn't get that. What always surprises me, even when I still watch it, is that he is Darth Vader before he is in the black suit. And, a lot of people just still consider him Anakin, but he was turned at that time. And so I think that is kind of a cool reveal. Like, oh, he's Darth Vader before he even gets, encased in that. So it's a minor reveal, but it's still kind of a cool little thing to me.
Yeah, it
That's
really
a good
is.
point. Yeah. I'm sorry, Jay, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and as I'm sitting here thinking about this too, I've thought about that before, Ryder, as well. And one of the things that I've thought about is that if he would not have been encased in the suit, his full visage and identity would have been, revealed to the masses as Darth Vader, that there was no way to hide his true identity. So it's not
Yeah.
like, like how would that have been different going forward? That's a whole other what if circumstance. Wow.
And Padme dies without knowing his name as Darth Vader, does she not?
No, she doesn't. She just says he's turned to the dark side. When she talks to Obi-Wan, he told me to turn to the dark side, that you've killed younglings. But I don't think Obi-Wan ever says Darth Vader.
Right. Because he learns of the name when he watches the security video, and
Right.
Sidious sends him off to Mustafar. Because I believe Sidious calls him Darth Vader in that recording.
Vader. Yeah, he calls him Vader.
Yeah, but he never says that to Padme. She does not know of his Sith identity at that point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. Now I need to go watch the end.
Right. But to the point you made, Ryder, about like not having a trilogy of Darth Vader wandering around being Darth Vader, I think you're right. And besides, it's given us the opportunity to see him do things in Rogue One and then in Obi-Wan Kenobi, and giving them an opportunity. They just gave us there was an excuse to bring him back and do very vicious things, even in Rebels, for that matter. So
yeah, right. Yeah. And it had to humanize. We had to have him humanized before we could see him turn to evil, or the story doesn't mean as much, I think. Indeed.
All right. Well, that was a fantastic conversation. Thank you, Ryder, as always, for coming and joining us for and kicking the whole thing off. Before we wrap this up, you want to remind everybody what you got going on with your podcasts and where they can find you.
Yeah, so on Idiot's Array, we are right now breaking down Skeleton Crew. So there's one more episode there, and then we'll get back to normal episodes of dissecting and taking deep dives into all things Star Wars. And on the Star Wars School of Dentistry, I'm going to start doing new episodes, and I am going to have Colonel Nathan R. Jessup on from A Few Good Men. He's got
Huh.
the quote of "You can't handle the truth." So
Oh my
if you want to
gosh.
listen to
Yeah.
stupid podcast episodes that are like 10 minutes long, and I make bad jokes and things like that, listen to the Star Wars School of Dentistry. And you can find Idiots Array and the Star Wars School of Dentistry everywhere you get your podcasts. Yeah. And you can follow me on Instagram at Ryder Waldron DDS, and pretty much everywhere else on social media.
All
Awesome.
right. Well, thanks again for joining us.
No, thanks so much. I love being on with you guys.
Thanks, Ryder.
Okay, there it is. We've got one under our belt.
Woohoo.
As I said during the conversation with Ryder, I was a little surprised how quickly we got through that segment. But again, it was less than 12 minutes, but it was all action. So it's not like we had a whole lot of philosophy of the Force or anything getting thrown around. But still, it was just fun geeking out over everything that happened there. And we got a lot more of that opening act of the movie to get through, for like another 20 minutes of the movie. So a
Right.
lot more to come on that vein.
Yes, for sure. And it's just great to be able to bounce those ideas and the memories and everything off of each other. And having Ryder on is always splendid.
Indeed, indeed. So, all right. Well, then, I can't wait to get to our next one next month. We got a lot more stuff coming up with Revenge of the Sith. I was teasing you before we started recording that I've already come up with 33 trivia questions on that first 11 minutes and 21 seconds. So, we'll be looking forward to that sometime in a couple months. We'll get to the novelization. We'll get into some of the behind the scenes stuff and deleted scenes as we get through the year. There's a lot more Revenges of the Sith conversation to come. But thank you for joining us for this part on Podcast Stardust. We hope you've enjoyed it. And if you want more of this, then make sure you've subscribed to the podcast on your podcatcher of choice. And once you've done so, rate, like, follow, all those type of things that help podcasts grow. You know what you're talking about. I'm talking about you listen to podcasts. And if you want to catch our entire catalog of shows, including the series we just did on the Phantom Menace last year, one of the best places to do that would be retrozap.com. It has everything that we've done, including our series on The Empire Strikes Back, Rogue One, Attack of the Clones, Return of the Jedi. What am I missing? I think those are the ones we've done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Phantom Menace, right. And while you're there, you can find the other great shows that are on the RetroZap Podcast Network, covering everything from superheroes to retro culture and Star Trek and more. Jay, I want to remind everybody again where we can be found online with our social media contacts and where else we've set up shop.
Oh, sure. You got it, Dennis. We are very conveniently found on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust. And we do love all the feedback that we get there. So please keep it coming. And we're also on YouTube. So we have two different YouTube outlets. We have our traditional YouTube channel and YouTube Music. So you can head over to both of those, like, subscribe, share those out. And those also do support reviews and interactions as well. So we would love to hear your thoughts on this first segment of Revenge of the Sith. And we still maintain our Pinterest boards where you can find all kinds of fun Star Wars ideas. And then we do have our Discord room. So if you want to get in on some real-time chatter, you can hit up the link in our show notes to that. And while you're there, you can check out all the other Discord rooms for all the other RetroZap shows that Dennis was just running down as well. And then one more link that you can check out is to our TeePublic store. And we do have 7 different show logo designs available for all kinds of things, from home goods to apparel and basically everything in between. So once again, you can hit up that link in our show notes, and every one of those purchases does help to support the show. And we are super thankful for that. So thanks in advance.
All right. It's a new year. You want to tell everybody what you've got going on in cosplay?
Oh, absolutely. So you can always find me on my Instagram, which is at j.snipscosplay. And I was just recently featured on Cosplay Over 40 as basically a feature post. And so I was very fortunate to be able to have that experience. And I do have another feature coming up as well that I will be able to give details about here very soon, but I'm very, very excited about that. So catch me on all my adventures there at j.snipscosplay.
All right. Coming up on the show this Friday, we've got the season finale of Skeleton Crew already. Can you believe it?
Ooh, no.
And then on Monday, we get into our weekly look at Star Wars news. So make sure you join us for that. So with that said, thanks for listening to episode 835 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. And until next time, may the Force be with you.